So you say for 50 years, evangelicals and politics in America have been unhealthily entwined in a mutual pursuit of power, contrasting with Jesus' kingdom built in the hearts of the forgotten and the oppressed, urging us to reject un-Christlike ways despite their acceptance as Christian. I can definitely say that's feels very true right now in the culture. Can you expound on this? And do you think this loss of focus on the kingdom of God is increasing the amount of anxiety and depression in Christians?
Yeah, I mean, this could be its own episode.
It totally
episodes.
Could.
My
When I was writing this, I was like, "This is good stuff." Yeah.
I don't know how deep you want me to go into this because the simple answer is yes.
Yeah.
So in a lot of my story, I really did deconstruct and really try and work out what I believe. And a lot of what I did was I studied church history. So I'm a huge church history nerd, and I'm very aware of the different movements that have popped up, even American church history and why they've popped up. So I could speak to some of that. What I'd like to springboard, like I said earlier, I love just pulling back to Jesus. So let me start there, and then we could go wherever conversation goes. And the very next question you guys have is around John 11, where he raises Lazarus from the dead. But right after that, he raised Lazarus from the dead, and you have the Sanhedrin, which is the Jewish ruling council. They are the teachers of the law. So you have the Pharisees and the Sadducees in there. And they're together, and they hear about Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, and they're freaked out. And they're scared to death. They're like, oh no, like people are beginning to believe in him and more people are beginning to follow him. And they say, if we let it go on like this, the Romans will take away our religion and our nation. And so what we see, first of all, are the same fears that led to Jesus' crucifixion are the same fears that caused, not all, but I believe that have caused, and I could tie some of it back to the reason that drove the religious right, but they drove religious leaders within American Christianity to seek power in ways that are similar to the Sanhedrin with Rome.
Yeah.
And so the same type of collusion that we saw lead Jesus to the cross has happened here in America with Christians and politics. And so that, if nothing else, that should cause us to give us goosebumps and kind of stand in kind of fear of some potential anti-Jesus. I don't want to use the term antichrist. People have ideas of what that is, but anti-kingdom-like ways. And James 3 says, I love it. He talks about two different types of wisdom. Wisdom from below that's demonic, and wisdom from above, which is of God. And he says that the wisdom that is from below seeks after selfish ambition, seeks after pride. It's divisive. I mean, it just lists all these things. Yeah, bullying. And it's those same value systems that says is wisdom from below. There's a lot there. I think that Christianity within America as a whole has kind of had some anxiety around it. You have the Puritans, and they made Christmas illegal. It was a straight up theocracy. And so as America became a melting pot, you have people like Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson wasn't a Christian. He was a deist, which meant he didn't believe in miracles. He believed that there was a God, but he had stepped back and doesn't involve himself in our world. So you have a deist. You have George Washington, who he was what we would call now an Episcopal. I think he was a senior warden, which meant he led his board. So he was a Christian, but he had slaves. He was a slave owner of slaves that had all kinds of different faiths. And so when they wrote our Constitution and put, our First Amendment in place, it was actually to keep from a theocracy and to keep the peace with all these other beliefs that some of their slaves and other people around them had. And so we tend to have these anxieties around specifically the First Amendment, and we try and fight for them since. You fast forward, there are 4 different pillars that have led American Christianity and evangelicalism to the place it is now.
You should write a book on that. That'd be
There's multiple books. The best one, Randall Balmer wrote the book, The Making of Evangelicalism. And what I love about him is he's a historian that doesn't really have a bias other than telling the truth, where some other ones I read, you hear like cynicism in it, and you hear bias in it. His is not. But so you see kind of this through the revivals, you see how people process, like Jonathan Edwards had 11 kids and lost some. And so some of his intensity of saying things like,
he's very angry, right?
Yeah, he was very angry. Yeah. Yeah, he was like, you were like a spider being dangled over a fire, and God looks at you with loathsome eyes and all this stuff he's saying. Well, you read some of his other works, and he's spiritual bypassing all over the place. Because he lost one of his kids, and he just doesn't know how to handle the pain and the grief. And so there's a lot of the things that have led to where we're at now. But in the last 50 years, to go back to the last 50 years, what we see, actually, I was raised in the movement under Bob Jones. And Bob Jones, him and Jerry Falwell, they wanted to keep their segregated schools. And so they were racist. And they wanted to keep their segregated schools. And so what they did was and I would say that it's still, we are seeing the fruit of it now, manipulating good-hearted, justice-minded Christians that care about life to get on the train to only focus on kind of the abortion issue in order to protect segregated schools. And I could tell you, and it's a power play.
Yeah.
And I could tell you, and you're like, well, how do you know that? And I said, well, because the circles I was in, Bob Jones University didn't even allow interracial dating until 2000. And so what you're seeing is these religious leaders in America that are manipulating the good hearts of good, justice, righteous-minded Christians in America to seek power and to hold their own, what I would say, evil rights and ways. And so that's a long way to say this is where we're at now. And so we now have to see through, because like I said, the powers of darkness, they don't favor a person and they don't favor a partisan side of the aisle.
Yeah.
So we enter into this and we hear things that are all just fear, and it kicks up our anxiety that, this election is going to be the election that makes or breaks all these things. And we hear those things, and they're playing off the anxieties of good-hearted people.
Yeah.
That's so true.
I agree. I'm so passionate about this, but it's a touchy topic because it is so divisive.
Yes.
In our world right now, but I 100% agree with what you're saying.
It's bringing up a lot of anxiety in people.
Yeah.
Yes.
And anger.
Well, and a lot of
anger.
And the division. I mean, it's like your family members even, they're so passionate about it. And I'm so completely the opposite.
Yeah.
Because I totally what you're saying, and you feel like they don't see that side of it. And it's just sad to me that it's so divisive.
Yeah.
When, like you said, I think they're good intentioned, they think they think they're, but it's just really sad.
Yeah, and I never want to question people's intentions. It's just, I think it's hard, and I never want to take a posture of like, well, I know this, I study this, because there's so many opinions out there and stuff like that. My big deal, again, I go back, does it look like Jesus?
Right,
exactly.
Right. And what does it look like to find peace within Jesus who's actually on the throne? Like, we're not waiting for him to be on the throne. He ascended to the right hand of the Father, and he rules now, and he rules the nations now. And there's nothing that's done now, just like he allowed humans to co-create and to join him in partnership in creation with him at the very beginning in Genesis 1 and 2 before the fall. He also invited the spiritual world to do the same. And so you have these interplays here to where he's going to allow, because he's allowed for people to have authority and they've made a mess of it, he's going to allow it to a point until one day he doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not like because we see this stuff happening in our world and our nation that he's not on the throne.
Right.
It just means that he has chosen to share his authority. And he will judge, especially humanity, on how that authority has been used. And